A group of young boys are digging holes in the sand in the middle of the desert while the sun beats down. A youngster who is no longer able to handle the job chooses to remove his shoes and touch the snake, only to be killed by it. At the same moment, Stanley Yelnats 4 is strolling through the city when a pair of shoes unexpectedly falls on his head, causing him to fall to the ground. Stanley chooses to bring the shoes home because his father is working on a remedy for smelly feet, but the cops approach him at that point. The police take him to his parents and immediately see that the shoes, which were taken from a renowned baseball player, are suspect. The man owns a flat with many pairs of shoes, while his son Stanley 4 has posters of the baseball player all over his walls. Given this evidence, Stanley is brought before the court, where he has the choice between going to jail or spending 18 months at Camp Green Lake. Stanley clearly picks the camp, but along the way, he can't help but question if this tragedy is a result of the family curse. The bus travels across a large desert with several holes, and for a moment Stanley believes he can see a traitor in his mule, but it turns out to be his imagination. He gets to a little, shady village populated by boys in prison garb. Stanley encounters the warden's right-hand man. Stanley's name amuses Mr. Sir. The youngster tells how the family's last name, Yelnats, is Stanley reversed, and how it became a practice to call the kid Stanley in order to maintain the joke, but Mr. Sir continues to explain how things operate here without any concern. Nobody would dare to leave the camp because there are no watchtowers or fences, and there are hundreds of miles of desert with no water source. Stanley is only given a shovel and 2 pairs of clothing, which he will use to dig holes. Every day, Stanley has to use a shovel to measure one hole that is 5 feet deep. The longer it takes for him to dig, the more time he will spend outside in the sun. He also has to be cautious about avoiding rattlesnakes and yellow-spotted lizards since they may be deadly. Dr. Podansky, the camp counselor, introduces Stanley to the camp and advises him that the most important rule is to avoid annoying the warden. Podansky forces the other boys to bring Stanley to the Vomit Kid, where he will sleep. Although the doctor uses their real names, the men only use the nicknames they have gained here while addressing one another. Zero, the youngest kid, is known by that name since he never speaks. Later, Stanley inquires about where he can refill his canteen, but the youngster pushes him about, reminding him to use the nicknames. After that, Stanley eats supper, which consists of only beans prepared in various ways. Because Stanley hasn't dug today, X-Ray steals some of his food, arguing that he deserves it more. When the boys ask Stanley why he was brought here, he responds that he stole well-known shoes. Everyone is taken aback when Zero asks if they have stars on them. Stanley remembers a portion of the trial when the baseball great stated that he grew up in an orphanage for that reason. As he recalls, he labeled Stanley a fake fan and gave to charity. It's late at night, and Stanley can't sleep, so he recalls his grandfather's assertion that the family is cursed, which is why Stanley 3 has never had any luck with his innovations. Even Stanley he made a fortune in the stock market, but he had the misfortune of being murdered by the notorious felon Kissing Kate. She earned the moniker because she would leave vibrant lipstick marks on the faces of her victims by kissing them after she murdered them. But instead of kissing Stanley, she simply stole his treasure chest and abandoned him in the desert. The guys are awakened the next morning while it's still dark outside to begin their labor. Everyone receives a tortilla and a shovel for breakfast, but X-Ray pushes Stanley and steals his when he grabs one. X-Ray's shovel is smaller and doesn't allow anyone else to use it, it seems. Mr. and Mrs. are there when they get to the excavation site. Sir informs Stanley that he must report any interesting discoveries he makes during his digging and that he will be granted the day off if the warden approves. Nevertheless, Mr. They insist that their search is solely intended to develop character and not to uncover anything in particular. All the boys start working, and occasionally the dirt they throw lands in a different hole. As Stanley concentrates on his hole, he tries to warn them to be cautious, but the lads merely chuckle at him and he rethinks the curse. His forefather Elia worked on a pig farm and fell in love with Myra, the boss's daughter. He went to see Madame Zeroni, the neighborhood fortune teller, for advice on how to win the girl's heart, but Zeroni advised him to give up on the girl and journey to America to face his destiny. Elia didn't give up and begged his supervisor for Myra's hand, but he was rejected since another applicant was offering a large pig as dowry. Finally, Zeroni felt sorry for him and showed him a trick. He then returned to Zeroni. Elia had to carry a tiny piglet up the hill every day so it could drink from the stream while she sang it a song. The pig would get bigger and Elia would become stronger until it was suitable for use as the greatest dowry. He had to return and lift Zeroni up the mountain so she could drink as well after giving the pig. A curse would be upon him and all his posterity if he did not accomplish that. Stanley kept an eye on every movement for a few days, and when the pig grew too big, he brought it to his employer. The 2 pigs were, however, identical in size, and the boss gave Myra the option of selecting her husband. Stanley was so infuriated by Myra's flippant approach that he made the choice himself, even though she couldn't decide, and suggested a guessing game to help her to follow Zeroni's initial advice and travel to America. Sadly, he neglected to bring Zeroni to the mountain before he left, and as a result, She cursed the promise. Let's return to the present. Mr. The youngsters fill their water bottles with water from the holes as Sir pulls up in his car and makes fun of Stanley for having his first blisters. Zero is the first to complete his work because he is a quick digger, and the boys believe that he consumes the sand. Since no one assists Stanley in leaving his hole once he is done, he must figure out how to climb out on his own. Upon his return to the city, he discovers that Mr. Sir has a gun trained on him, but in reality, he is firing at a yellow spotter lizard. The lizard jumps out to attack Stanley when the shot misses, but Mr. Sir fires again and the tiny lizard dies. As the days go by, Stanley begins to adjust to the camp's routine. After consuming revolting beans in the morning, he spends the day digging, which results in more blisters on his hands. In some cases, the shower doesn't even function, and there are frequently dangerous creatures nearby. The other lads also make fun of him for being a softie and continue to annoy him. Stanley keeps a low profile to avoid problems, and when he writes his mother, he tells her that he's having a fantastic time at a typical summer camp. One day, Stanley finds a fossil and brings it to Podansky, but the physician tells him that the warden doesn't care about fossils. He also reveals that the warden's grandfather owned the land in this region and that there used to be a lake here. The town's former vitality and prosperity are brought back to life in a flashback. Sam, a trader, frequently arrived with his mule-drawn wagon to sell his amazing onions, which he said could treat every ailment and ward off lethal lizards. Catherine, the neighborhood instructor, was the object of Sam's affection, and he always brought a bag of onions just for her so that she would give him a jar. From the peaches she collected in return, Catherine was well liked by all the men in the community, and they were envious of the attention she would give Sam. Due to the leaks in the school roof on a rainy day, Catherine was forced to send the children home, and Sam offered to repair them. He began to make repairs elsewhere in the institution as well, since this gave him more opportunity to get to know her. But he also had to keep an eye on how the evening adult class kept making inappropriate remarks at her. Walker, the warden's grandfather, even asked her out, but she rejected him, which made him rage. The institution eventually turned out to be the nicest structure in the area, but Sam's mule was gone, so he bought a boat instead. Sam and Catherine eventually mustered the confidence to kiss one gloomy afternoon, not knowing that Walker had seen them and promptly spread the word around town. As punishment, the villagers gathered and set fire to the school in a matter of hours. The sheriff was intoxicated and wanted a kiss from Catherine, so she ran to him for assistance. The sheriff made fun of Catherine as she shoved him away, reminding her that interracial marriages are prohibited and that Sam would be put to death. Catherine rushed to warn Sam in horror, but it was too late. The townsman shot him on his boat. At a later point, Catherine returned, gave the sheriff the kiss he sought, and then murdered him. After that, she fled town and became the infamous criminal Kissing Kate. Returning to the present, X-Ray advises Stanley to bring him whatever he finds in the future. Stanley later gets into a near altercation when he inadvertently falls on one of his tormentors in town. Stanley has now gained their respect, even though the boys quickly pacify them. He is known as Caveman and also gets a better position on the water line. Later, Stanley receives a letter from his mother informing him that his father's experiment is still unsuccessful and that the landlord could evict them at any moment. Stanley is prepared, but since Stanley confesses he never learned, Stanley asks him to teach him. But Stanley declines, claiming that he isn't a good teacher and that he needs his rest because he is exhausted by the end of the day. Stanley is taken aback when he finds a small item bearing the initials KB during a different excavation session. Although the youngster ponder whether it's a shotgun shell, it appears to be too thin. Disregarding Stanley's efforts to defend himself, X-Ray seizes the item. As soon as Podansky sees it, he calls the boss, who arrives right away, and the lads are taken aback to learn the warden is a stunning woman. She is quite happy about this find, so she tells X-Ray to take the day off and orders the rest of the crew to thoroughly dig out the space surrounding X-Ray's hole. Because it's the wrong location, the lads put in a lot more effort that afternoon, but they come up empty-handed. The boys must continue digging in the same tunnel they have made for the next several days, but all they discover is a little dial. The lads eventually give up, and the warden gives up as well, and they resume digging their own holes. One of the lads takes a bag of sunflower seeds from the vehicle the following day as Mr. Sir is filling their water bottles. The boys start sharing them when Sir departs, but sadly, Mr. the bag is immediately noticed to be missing by the driver, who turns the truck around. The lads hurry to bury the seeds, but they inadvertently fall at Stanley's feet, so he makes an effort to cover them with sand. Stanley shields his buddy by claiming responsibility for the planting, much to the astonishment of everyone, when Mr. Sir comes back and notices the seeds. Stanley is then brought before the warden for punishment by Mr. Sir. The warden shows her special nail polish, which she creates using rattlesnake venom, while they are inside her office, where there are numerous posters about Kissing Kate. The warden swiftly paints her nails, then slaps Mr. Sir for disturbing Stanley's digging over something trivial like seeds, before sending Stanley back to work. The other men think of him as a hero when he gets back to the excavation site, and Zero has completed his hole. Zero learns to read from Stanley in return. The next time they see Mr. E is so furious at Stanley for leaving him with 2 hideous nail wounds that he doesn't even bother to refill his flask. The tiny tube that Stanley discovered was, in his opinion, kissing Kate's lipstick, as he recalls what he saw in the workplace. A further flashback reveals that Kate just murdered those who were responsible for Sam's murder and the school's demolition. She did, however, steal a lot, and she hid the treasure chest she took from Stanley the First in the former location of the lake. Returning to the present, Stanley starts instructing Zero in reading and writing. Zero tells his true identity, which is Hector Zeroni, which means that he is related to Madame Zeroni. Zero begins assisting Stanley with his holes because he digs so quickly, much to the envy of the other boys. Zero tells the tale of his mother one afternoon, who labored hard to support him but eventually vanished. Since then, Zero has been homeless. Later, one of the nasty lads keeps making fun of Stanley for receiving assistance in the hole. Podansky urges them to settle their issue by fighting as Stanley faces him. Stanley is easily overpowered as the lads fight on the ground, so Zero steps in to assist and nearly murders the other men. Podansky fires into the air to halt them, and shortly afterward, the warden arrives to find out what occurred. Zero is helping Stanley. The lads inform her, but Zero immediately responds by saying that he's teaching Zero how to read in return. But the warden is enraged, and Podansky repeatedly makes fun of Zero, calling him stupid. Eventually, Zero loses it, strikes Podansky with a shovel, and flees into the wilderness. The warden advises Mr. Sir to leave him alone, but Mr. Sir wants to pursue him. Since Zero had no one, they could simply erase his files and act as if he never existed. The youngsters debate Zero's impending demise in the desert in the evening. Stanley is constantly concerned and recalls the tale of Stanley, who was the first person to survive 16 days in the desert after Kate stole from him. He apparently took shelter in a location known as God's Thong, but no one knows where it is, and Stanley I couldn't say because he was half out of their minds when they discovered him. Stanley is disturbed when a new boy comes to take Zero's place the next day. He devises a strategy, and when Mr. Sir arrives to refill their canteens, Stanley grabs the vehicle. Stanley attempts to shove Mr. Sir out of the way, but he is distracted when the vehicle falls into a hole after he immediately goes after him and grabs the door. Stanley gets out of the car and sprints into the desert, encouraged by the other boys, determined not to give up. The warden instructs Mr. Sir to announce that Stanley is missing in 2 weeks when she learns about it, since there will be nothing to discover by then. Stanley keeps walking under the blazing sun, ignoring all the poisonous snakes around him. Zero is finally found beneath Sam's boat, exhausted but still living. He's been eating the peaches that Kate gave Sam so many years ago, which have turned into jam in the jars, to stay alive. Stanley sees a distant mountain that resembles a thumb after consuming some as well, and he comes to the conclusion that this is where his forefather lived. The pair disembark from the boat and begins the ascent up the mountain, which requires considerable effort. Zero extends his shovel to assist Stanley up after he stumbles and nearly falls. Unfortunately, this damages Zero's hands, so Stanley does his best to wrap them up. The lads continue for a time, but soon Zero becomes weak and falls. Zero is too tired to move, though, and Stanley grabs him before he rolls away. In the same way that his forefather carried the pig, Stanley refuses to give up and carries his buddy all the way to the summit of the mountain. Stanley eventually finds a little stream with water and Sam's delectable onions after spotting some green. He quickly awakens Zero, and the two lads eat and drink in order to recuperate. Stanley also sings a tune that his family enjoys, oblivious to the fact that it's the pig's song, which has been handed down through the years. Madame Zeroni's spirit is now at rest. After the curse is removed from his family, Stanley III at last completes his creation and finds a potent cure for foot odor by mixing the family celebrates because of the peaches and onions. Zero makes a big revelation the following day. He's the one who stole the shoes. Without realizing the shoes' notoriety, he had merely taken them as a donation to the shelter he was in. But the police quickly pursued him, so he removed the boots and tossed them over the bridge, unintentionally hitting Stanley. The next day, Zero was caught stealing shoes from Payless. In contrast, Stanley is happy that this occurred and sees it as fate. In the meantime, Stanley's lawyer comes to the camp to pick him up since he has been found to be innocent. The lawyer vows to return with support even though the warden kicks her out. After they've recovered, Stanley and Zero return to the excavation site and discover the pit where Stanley discovered the lipstick. They are thrilled to have at last located the well-known chest after a great deal of searching. However, just then the warden and Mr. Sir discover them, but a group of lizards emerges and covers both the lads and the chest to shield them. The warden chooses to let the lizards kill the men and tells a tale of how her grandpa used to force her to dig even during Christmas. The lizards continue to not move or bite the children even after morning. The attorney, accompanied by a few officers, abruptly interrupts the wait. The warden makes up a tale about the boys taking the chest from her office and fleeing, but Zero shows that they are innocent by indicating Stanley's name on it. The attorney then placed the chest in her vehicle after they returned to town and informed them that they were leaving. but the attorney requests Stanley's file because he won't go unless Zero is there. After realizing the file is missing, the officer calls to request permission for an inquiry and discovers that both the warden and the men are taken into custody since Sir is a criminal on the run and Podansky is not actually a physician. The first rain in decades falls at that point, and the lads emerge to rejoice. The chest is opened by Stanley and Zero in front of the family a few days later, revealing a plethora of riches, including AT&T shares. The family concurs with Stanley's wish to split the wealth with Zero, so Zero's first action is to employ a private detective to locate his mother, which leads to a highly emotional reunion. The boys are eventually sent to actual therapy after the camp is shut down. Stanley's and Zero's families reside in a high-end area where they are frequently visited by their pals from summer camp. Stanley's innovation is a tremendous hit, and the well-known baseball player is currently working on his advertisements, demonstrating that it was all connected from the start. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.